Tommy Jagai of FanSided here with NFL expert Marcus Mosher as we talk about the NFL draft 2 weeks and change away now at this point, Marcus. We want to dive into some of the most fascinating prospects in the class this week. If you missed last week's show, make sure you go check that out. Stack in the Box YouTube channel. You can find us on all streaming platforms. Also, check out fansided.com and the amazing work that they are doing over there in preparation for the NFL draft. Marcus, we're going to talk fascinating prospects today. Should be fun.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a handful of guys in every class that kind of decide and shape the draft. And I think these 10 guys that we're going to talk about today, some of them are going to go in round one. Some of them are going to be day 2 picks. But I'm excited to get into the list.
All right, make sure you like and subscribe. Marcus, we'll start with the polarizing prospect in this class, Kadyn Proctor. This is one of your guys, so I want you to kind of open us up. What do you feel? How do you feel about Proctor?
Yeah, so if you don't know, this is the Alabama left tackle who is 6'6.5", 352 pounds. And Alabama was using him as a receiver at times last year. They used him as a fullback. He's just a big athlete. He had a 32.5-inch vertical, which is in the 90th percentile among all tackles. It's the highest vertical ever for an offensive lineman over 350 pounds. And you see this guy move at Alabama, and you think he should be a dominating prospect, but he's not. The play just really never matched the hype. And then on top of that, Tommy, you're talking about somebody who is massive, but not particularly long, an 81 and 5/8 inch wingspan. That's actually below average for an offensive tackle. The arm length is well below average, 33 and 3/8. So he's tall, he's wide, he's not necessarily long. He's a good but not great athlete. And I struggle with him because I want him to be dominant, and you just don't see enough dominant reps on his tape.
Yeah, I mean, there's some traits that you can really get behind. Like, this guy is really quick-footed for how big he is, massive human being. He's 20 years old. He at least graded out well this past season, but when we go back and grind that tape, when he loses pretty ugly. And I just can't get over the parallels between him and JC Latham, who went a few years back, both struggle with those inside counters when somebody does an inside spin on him. Like, he just struggles to regain that ground. Definitely some good traits to work with there, but I just don't know what the projection is for this guy, Marcus. Do you think that Proctor sticks as a true tackle in the NFL, or do you think he moves inside to guard?
Well, and that's what makes him so fascinating. I don't think he's a guard because he's too tall and he plays too tall, right? If you're a guard, you're actually better off to be shorter and be a little bit more compact.
He's got mass to him, though, for sure.
He's got mass, but I also don't know if he's got the mentality to be a guard. Like, you've got to have some toughness and some grit, and I just don't know if he has it. I think he's going to have to be a right tackle in the NFL, and my hope is that he lands with a team that has got a really good offensive line coach and doesn't necessarily get drafted like inside the top 10 or top 15 picks. I want him to go to a team that already has an established offensive line, because I think he's going to need that time and development for his career to work out right.
Yeah, he probably will. And let's address the elephant in the room too. When we talk about offensive linemen being drafted over 350 pounds, there's guys have a history of maybe trying to keep that weight off. And I think that it can be an issue where you don't want to maybe balloon up in the offseason and then have to try to cut 20, 30 pounds. Like, that's another factor that needs to be considered. I think he's a guy that should be in consideration, at least late first round, because of the traits, the physical profile, the movement skills, the age, 20 years old. He has some things to work with, but definitely not the safest prospect in this class. Marcus, I'm going to go to another one who is a consensusly considered a better prospect, but is also polarizing for some of the opposite reasons. This is Rueben Bain, a guy who is just an exceptional football player. When you put on the film and you can see, I don't think anybody would have any qualms saying this was the best defensive player in college football this year. Like, so dominant, drew a tons of attention, was on a team that was in the championship game, graded out really well. He's a 21-year-old football player. The problem with Bain, Marcus, is that he just has such an unusual build and athletic profile. We're talking about a guy that's 6'2 and a quarter, 263, so plenty heavy enough, but just a 77-inch wingspan, 30 and 7/8 inch arms. That's 1 percentile among all NFL edge rushers since 1999, according to Mock Draftable, and just 9 1/8 inch hands, really small hands too. So we're talking about a really, really compact football player. But why I think he's such a fascinating player, Marcus, is he has such an incredibly lethal combination of power and bend. You just don't see this in football players. And so even if he's a 4'8" guy, like, he's going to take the fastest route to the quarterback because he can just flat out bend underneath you and power through you. I really, really like Bain a lot.
I like Bain a lot too, but there's also some production stuff that has me a little bit concerned. I've got this database of every edge rusher that has been draft eligible, that has been invited to the combine since 2010, and their tackle for a loss production, and he ranks outside of the top 200 guys.
Yeah.
So like he played a lot of snaps, he got some sacks, but he was not a dominant college player like a lot of these other first round picks that we generally see. Like I'll give you like a really good example. Willie Anderson had a year where I believe he had 29 tackles for a loss. Excuse me, 34 tackles for a loss in a single season. Myles Garrett was in that 29 mark. You're looking at Rueben Bain, who's in that, 13 to 14 mark, and it's fine.
Yeah.
But it's not really a guy that would go first round in any single draft. So again, we like the tape, but there are some major, major concerns here.
I remember other people having concerns about a player with a similar profile, but with more length, less bend. And that's Jared Verse a few years back, ended up being rookie of the year, already maybe a top 7 to 9 edge rusher in the NFL. They are very different in terms of the way they win. I think Verse was more upright. Bain is more bendy and not as long. But man, we talk about a guy that I think a vast majority of the NFL draft analysts overlooked in some way, shape, or form. Dallas Turner was in that class. Some of them had Turner over him, and I just couldn't get behind it because the film was so much better. That's kind of how I feel about Bain this year. He's going to be my edge rusher one, as unpopular of an opinion as that is, because I do think this combination of power bend is going to translate very well at the next level. I'll find out if that was a bad decision or not soon enough. Marcus, you're up next with Eli Stowers, just a freak athlete at the tight end position.
Yeah, he had a 45.5-inch vertical, and that is 2 inches better than any other tight end in NFL history. Do you know how ridiculous of an athlete you've got to be 2 inches better than everybody else who's ever come at the position? He also has the best broad jump of all time. His 40-yard dash is inside the top 20 of all time. And he was productive at Vanderbilt. He's a former quarterback that made the move to tight end late in his career. But the reason why he's on this list is he has no interest in blocking. It's not that just he's a bad blocker. He's got no interest in doing it. So he's really a wide receiver by name, but I don't think he's a guy that you put out as like an X receiver or as an outside receiver. I think he can do that, but that's not how he wins. He's really a big-bodied slot receiver. And I'm fascinated to see what teams do with this guy. Do they think he could be the next Trey McBride, who is a pretty awful blocker in his own right? Can he get better as a blocker? If not, what are we looking at here? Are we looking at a player that teams basically just consider a receiver and go nickel all the time? I can't wait to see where Stowers goes because he is such a unique player that I think he could be an impactful guy right away.
Yeah, and if he ends up being the McBride type, I mean, there's a ton of value in that guy, even with zero blocking ability. If you can work the middle of the field, be that 100-catch, 1,000-yard tight end, there's only so many of those in the NFL. Certainly has the receiving upside in that regard. Marcus, I want to talk about D'Angelo Pons again. I predicted last week on our show, we made our bold draft predictions, that he would slide into the back half of the first round, late in the first round. Pons is such a good player on film. If you look at the grades, that aligns. The last 3 years been dominant. He's young. He declared early. He's a guy who just he's always in the right place. The problem with D'Angelo Pons is he is 5'8.5" at the cornerback position, 182 pounds. That's second percentile height, 11 percentile weight. His 29 and 3/8 arms mark is his second percentile. Is he going to be limited to being a nickel defender in the NFL, or can he defy all odds and play on the boundary? I think that if he's able to make it work for a zone team at his size, he could be pretty exceptional, maybe a smaller version of Trent McDuffie, but a really, really good football player with impressive instincts.
Yeah, and he's really tough because I don't think you can live on the outside when you're
Mm,
that small. I mean, not only is he
that's
short,
fair.
he's also not he just doesn't have a lot of bulk to him. He bulked up to 182 pounds at the combine, and that was in the 11th percentile. The arm length is all-time outlier. Like, this would be the smallest outside cornerback in NFL history,
Yeah.
but he also doesn't have a ton of experience playing in the slot. So you'd be drafting him with the idea of moving him to a new position.
Mhm.
And while I don't doubt that he could handle the slot well, a lot of teams are kind of moving away from these really small slot corners because they want guys that they can leave on the field on first and second down and stop the run and blitz and hold up against tight ends. He's an awesome football player. And I think he's going to figure it out, but it's a big projection trying to figure out what he's going to be in the next level.
All right, Marcus, you're up next with Akeem Mesidor, the working tandem pass rusher with Rueben Bain there at Miami. What are your thoughts?
Mesler is tricky because it took until his 6th year to finally break out. And even then, one of the things I like to look for are first round edge rushers with 1.5 tackles for a loss per game in their best season. He was at 1.17. Even if he would have been at 1.25, that would have been better. But he played a ton of snaps at Miami, wasn't that disruptive as a run defender. He's 25 years old with an injury history. He didn't do any testing at the combine. And yet, every time you see one of these mocks, he always goes inside the top 20 picks. And it's not to say that he's not deserving of being drafted high because he was a really good player this year. But there are a lot of boxes that are unchecked here that if you're drafting him inside the top 20, might make you feel a little queasy.
I agree. It's a little bit concerning. The production didn't come until so late. And that's the qualm I have with Mesidor. I think he's a good football player. I think he's pretty pro ready. He can come in for a team like Tampa Bay or whatnot and try to get them over the hump. But if you're drafting a 25-year-old, legitimate 25-year-old football player, you better be good right now because your growth curve probably is not going to be as good as someone who's 20, 21, 22 years old. You're kind of maxed out in a sense. Not only that, I think the other factor that needs to be considered, if you are a first round pick, a lot of teams value guys that can, as a first rounder, can earn a second contract. Are you going to give Mesidor a second contract entering basically age 30 after the 5th-year option? Like, this is an old football player. He needs to be good on his rookie deal for sure.
And that's my concern is it only injuries? If he was fully healthy, would he have come out 3 years ago and it's not a big deal? Or was he only productive because he was 24 beating up on 18, 19-year-old tackles? We'll see.
Fair question. You are tuned into Stacking the Box, where NFL fans come to talk, celebrate, and debate. For more coverage, hit up fansided.com, powered by the passionate fans at FanSided. Marcus, I've got one of my favorite prospects in this class here, Jordan Tyson, very polarizing wide receiver because of the injury stuff. You go back to late in the 2022 season, suffered a multi-ligament knee injury that affected him in 2023, only suited up for 3 games, didn't record a reception in 2023. And then this past year in 2025, dealt with a nagging hamstring injury that is lingering to this day. But if you turn on the tape and you look at him for what it is and what he can do at that size, inside the hashes, outside the hashes, his ability to create separations, run routes, gain separation from the cornerback at the top of his route is exceptional. His movement skills at 6'2 plus, 200 plus is very rare. And I would beg somebody to find that NFL comp who has this size profile that has this type of hip fluidity and movement skills. I think there's a ton worth betting on, but the injury risks are real. And I just don't know what his range looks like. I think the potential reward is exceptionally high. You're looking at a wide receiver 1 upside in the NFL, but you also could just get a guy who is chronically injured in the NFL.
Yeah, and you saw Daniel Jeremiah from NFL Network on Monday kind of criticize the toughness. He just didn't think he was a very tough football player, and he cited a couple times where he slid feet first, short of the first down, rather than trying to power through defenders. Now, some teams aren't going to care. There are going to be some that really ask the receivers to be physical in the block that are just going to have him off their draft board. So I'm with you. He is so supremely talented, but I can see him being a guy that does fall in the draft.
Yeah, Marcus, and just to give kind of a parallel to how much teams typically value guys that can separate, Deontay Johnson was on 5 teams in a calendar year
Yeah.
with character issues, major drop issues throughout his career. But 5 teams in a calendar year took a chance on him because the guy could separate and get open all the time. If Tyson is healthy, I am betting on those traits for sure. I just don't know. It's a big, big if he can stay on the football field. Marcus, you're up next with Caleb Banks, another really boomer bust type prospect here.
If you watch his game against LSU in 2024, you'll be convinced that this is the best player in the class. Like, he's got that kind of tape out there where he is dominant. And when I mean dominant, I mean like guys that we haven't seen a defensive tackle like this in a long time, but he struggles to stay healthy. He broke his foot at the NFL Combine. He was in and out of practices at the Senior Bowl. Caleb Banks has the potential to be one of the top 5 defensive tackles in the league, but he's probably going to fall to day 2 of the draft because he's just so wildly inconsistent, and you just don't know what you're getting from play to play, and you don't know how often he's going to be on the field.
Yeah, he's the planet theory guy. You don't see defensive tackles this big, this long, this strong, carry the weight the way that he does, have the good Senior Bowl performance, have the flashes that are just A+, and you can see all there is to work with. And then at the same time, you see he's only played so many games in college football. He's been a part-time player. He can't stay on the field very long. He's a bit of an older prospect, not as old as like Mesidor we just talked about. But when you factor all those things together, it's like, what is this guy's range? Where should he go? Now, I would argue that in a weak defensive tackle class, let's be honest about it, it's not very good at the top. He could still be the defensive tackle 1 if you're betting on the upside and traits. Maybe you would take a saver player like Caden McDonald. That's fine. But man, he's right up there still in this class. Where do you think he should go?
Probably in the 20s or 30s, because for all the reasons you just mentioned, like there's just not very many of these guys. And if you're a team like, let's say the Chargers, that really could use a defensive tackle, you put him with Jim Harbaugh, who's one of the best coaches in the league, and you try to figure it out. But yeah, I think at that point you're shooting for upside. You can find average players later in the draft. I think anywhere from 22 on, I would be comfortable taking Banks.
All right, Marcus, I want to talk about Spencer Fano, a guy who is really impressive on tape. I mean, he put together 2 excellent years. If you go back to his 2024 season, that film was awesome. His grades then were awesome. I think he had a 92.6 grade by PFF in that season. He was 19 years old for the first half of 2024. He's a really young football player, one of the younger first round prospects in the class, going to be a 21-year-old. And he's a great athlete too, and you could see his movement skills on display at the combine. Ran a 4.91. I mean, the guy is explosive. He's fast. He's quick-footed. Excellent feet. The problem is these arms are so concerning if you're looking at him as a tackle, because even though you like the 6'5.5", 311-pound frame, 32 in an 1/8-inch arms are 3rd percentile all time. And his 9-inch hands, 2nd percentile all time. That is so concerning, especially if we lose a little recency bias here. Will Campbell, with a very similar profile, struggled mightily down the stretch and into the playoffs last year. I don't know if teams are going to view him as a tackle. And if he is a guard and his best thing is quick-footed pass protection, how valuable are you as a guard? I think he's a very fascinating player because I just don't know where you play this guy. You try him at tackle first, maybe, and then see if he can overcome that historic outlier arm length. And if not, maybe you can get a good like wide zone guard or center.
See, this is where I love Fano. I think he's one of the best players in the class. Yeah. If you go by the pro day measurement, he was 32 7/8, which again, still below average, but it's
still
better.
Terrible for a tackle.
It is, but he's also, like, to me, he's got a 3-inch longer wingspan than Will Campbell. And I think for Campbell, he's the example of, for a lot of people, why it wouldn't work. Will Campbell was a good tackle for most of the regular season. He played hurt in the postseason. I think at least going into the postseason, there's no way that New England would have taken back that pick. So I'm not really willing to write off Fano because of some postseason struggles for Will Campbell. In fact, I think he's just a better player. He was more productive in college. He's got a longer wingspan. I love Fano. I would take him inside the top 10 pretty easily.
I like Fano. I think he should be a mid-first rounder. Marcus, we got 2 more we got to get through really quick. You got Peter Woods up here.
He's just a defensive tackle with no production and average athleticism. And I think a lot of people assumed that he was going to be a top 10, top 15 pick after the 2024 season. And he just didn't get any better. And that's my worry, is that, the teams figure him out. It's just the lack of athleticism make him where he's kind of a tweener in a bad way in the NFL. I don't think he's a particularly good run defender. I think Peter Woods is somebody that you're hoping can develop in the NFL with better coaching, but I just don't see a supreme athlete, and I don't see the supreme production. And usually those are defensive tackles that go on day 2 of the draft.
Yeah, it's always concerning when you take a big step in the wrong direction the year before you're eligible for the draft, and that's exactly what Woods did. Marcus, and the 10th and final name we have on this list, I've got Emmanuel Pregnon, a guy who came off of a really good season, looks the part. I mean, he's just exactly like you'd want your NFL guard to be built, but A-plus traits for the position. My question with him is, you are a 2-time transfer, a 5-year college player. You like Mesidor, are going to be a 25-year-old rookie. Why did it take you so long to have a breakout season where you kind of went up the map? And I just, it's the part that I question, because all the grades, the tape, it was quite poor before this. It was very, very modest. Suddenly has a great season.
He's really big and powerful, though, and those guys just don't stay very long in the draft. So I'm fascinated. We'll see where he lands, because I do think he can be a quality guard in the NFL. We'll see where he goes. I think he's more of a late first-round pick, early second-round pick, but we'll see.
All right, this is the Stacking the Box show. It premieres every Tuesday and Thursday evening. Be sure to check it out. You can follow Marcus on X at Marcus_Mosier. Follow me on X at Tommy Jaga. You can download the Stacking the Box podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also, check us out on YouTube. You can follow my written work on stillcurtain.com. Check out Marcus's written work on the FanSided NFL Network. And be sure to check out fansided.com for all your daily sports news and opinions. Make sure you like and subscribe to this stream. Thanks again for listening to Stacking the Box.